feeling like you have intuitive abilities and yet being scared to develop them is more common than you think. And that fear might mean that you have a witch wound. Welcome to Mystical and Practical, the podcast that demystifies the soul's journey, the spirit world, and spiritual practices. I'm Meli Guidance, a past life psychic, certified Akashic Records reader, and channeling coach. Here, we talk about spirit guides, the Akashic Records, reincarnation, and everything that connects the seen to the unseen, all with both feet firmly on the ground. Ready to decode the spirit world and connect with your inner magic? Let's jump right in. Hi there, hope you are well. Today this episode is about something you may very well have heard on social media, and that is the witch wound, but do not fear, it's not targeted to women listening to this who are considering themselves witches. A lot of people, men, women, carry that past life trauma within them. So you don't need to be wearing a giant pointy hat and brewing potions in your kitchen and identify as a witch to be affected by it. So this episode is really for anyone who is curious about past life trauma and maybe a trauma that is keeping you from exploring your intuitive gifts. And this wound can affect anyone who may have been persecuted, rejected, or punished in another lifetime because they were considered different, threatening, or dangerous. Now, some may have been healers, herbalists, midwives, mediums, or guardians of spiritual knowledge, but others may simply have had the misfortune of being too independent for their time, living on the fringes of their communities or attracting the jealousy of the wrong person. And experiences like these can leave some pretty subtle scars that are kind of in the background and can make you have some fears and reactions in your current life. Maybe today you are desperately trying to develop your intuitive gifts, your psychic abilities, while you are constantly questioning your perceptions, like your clairs, and you may be dreaming of taking more space, maybe at work or in your life in general, but you panic the moment that you have eyes on yourself. Maybe even you feel perfectly comfortable talking about spirituality with certain people close to you, your close-knit circle, and then you hide your tarot deck the second your in-laws walk into the room. So in short, one part of you wants to be seen while another would rather hide under the table. And so in this episode, I'm going to explain what the witch wound really is, where it can come from, and most importantly, how it may still be showing up in your life today. And sometimes without you even making the connection. And I'm also going to tell you about the past life that helped me understand my own witch wound and one of the reasons my fear of judgment and betrayal were so intense. Now, I won't be going too deeply into the healing process today because this topic deserves much more than a few quick tips and like a 30-minute episode. In fact, I devote 2 complete lessons on the witch wound in my past life regression course that will be released this fall. And also, one more important clarification before we begin is that being afraid of judgment, of rejection, and wanting to hide your spirituality doesn't prove that you have a witch wound. These reactions can also come from your childhood, your upbringing, your environment, or experiences that you have had in this lifetime. So as always, when we talk about past lives, we're exploring a possibility. We're not trying to squeeze every wound we have into the same kind of spiritual box. Okay, so let's begin. And as I keep saying, let's begin with the beginning. What is the witch wound? So, contrary to what the name might suggest, the witch wound doesn't only affect people who identify as witches today. More broadly, it refers to a soul memory from a past life in which someone was persecuted, rejected, imprisoned, exiled, or executed because they were perceived as different. In some incarnations, that person may genuinely have practiced herbal healing, rituals, or certain forms of spirituality. And they may have been a healer, herbalist, midwife, intuitive, psychic, or just guardian of spiritual knowledge. But in other cases, spirituality had nothing to do with it. They may simply have lived alone, possessed knowledge that others didn't understand, being too independent for their time, or they were not going to church enough or at all, or they just failed to conform to the expectation of their community. And sometimes being different was just enough. An accusation, jealousy, revenge, or collective fear could turn an entire group against one person. They might have been accused because a child became ill, a harvest failed, they rejected someone's advances, or a neighbor simply thought, well, hey, they are strange. So, having a witch wound doesn't necessarily mean that you practice witchcraft in a past life, or even in this life. It means that, well, it may mean that you were labeled a threat because you were different, influential, independent, or difficult to control because men were afraid of women they couldn't control. And just to give you some historical context, the major witch hunts took place primarily in Europe between the 15th and 18th century. And in North America, the Salem witch trials of 1692 are probably the best knowns that we have here in North America, but they just represent only a small part of this history. And talking about history, historians have an estimate that around 40 to 60,000 people were executed for witchcraft during this period. And most of them were women, but several thousand men were also prosecuted. So that's important to say. The witch wound is often presented as a feminine wound, but it doesn't exclusively affect women. And also, you need to think about the fact that we reincarnate in different roles and genders. And so in a past life, in your past lives, you've been a man, a woman, many, many times. So someone who today is incarnated as a man may have a witch wound of a time they were a woman in the past and they have been persecuted and or exiled. And it also doesn't necessarily come from European witch trials. A similar memory may come from another period or civilization in which someone was punished for their spirituality, knowledge, influence, or just refusal to conform to the norm. So what connects these experiences isn't a particular date, location, or method of execution. It's the wound left behind by rejection, persecution, and the fear of being yourself. And talking of fears, in my past life regression course, I primarily classify past life traumas into 5 categories, and the witch wound is in one of those categories, and that is the emotional and relational wound. And of course, some of these incarnations also involve significant physical trauma. For example, a witch, quote unquote, that has been burnt at the stake or drowned. That means there's going to be some physical trauma and a fear of water or a fear of fire. But the deepest pain doesn't always come from what happened to the body. It often comes from what happened within the person's relationships. They may have been reported by a neighbor, accused by someone they knew, abandoned by their friends, betrayed by their partner, or separated from their children. They may have watched people they loved turn against them simply to avoid becoming targets themselves. And that's why this memory is often connected to 4 major wounds, which are rejection, betrayal, abandonment, and humiliation. Now, rejection says, who I am is unacceptable. Betrayal says, someone I trusted turned against me. Abandonment says, the people I love will not protect me. And humiliation says, I was publicly exposed and then condemned. And sometimes the most traumatic moment isn't even the imprisonment or execution. It's the moment the person looks into their partner's eyes and realizes they won't defend them. The moment a friend confirms an accusation to protect herself, or the moment a community they helped for years suddenly decides they are a threat. And so, why does rejection from the group leave such a deep mark on the soul? Well, that's because in other eras, belonging to a family or community was directly tied to survival. If you were being cast out, that could mean losing your home, your resources, your livelihood, reputation, and the protection of the group. And at that time, they didn't want women to work or be educated. So if you didn't have a husband or a community to take care of yourself, you were completely alone and therefore in survival mode. So after an experience like that, the soul may hold on to conclusions such as, if I show people who I really am, I'm going to be rejected. If I develop my spiritual gifts, I will be punished. If I stand out, I will lose the people I love. If I trust someone, they may use my secrets against me. To be safe, I have to keep a low profile. This is so common. These beliefs usually are unconscious, of course. Instead, the person feels a fear or a resistance they cannot explain. Their soul is still trying to prevent a situation it associates with danger, as I mentioned in my latest episode 24 on past life memories. So, the witch wound can be particularly present in people who are trying to develop their intuition and their psychic abilities. And I've been there. So it's like one part of you feels a very clear calling towards spirituality, and you want to understand your abilities like your clairs, you want to communicate with your spirit guides or use your abilities to support others. And yet there's a part of you that resists because to the soul, using those abilities may once have had a very real consequences, even maybe leading to your death. So you may think, oh, using my gifts, quote unquote, meant at that time being discovered. And being discovered meant being labeled as different. And being different meant being rejected. And being rejected meant losing my safety, my family, or my life. So a person may have very strong abilities, intuitive abilities, that is, while also struggling tremendously to trust them. Their block here doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have those abilities. It may just be an old attempt to protect them. And one part of them wants to kind of open the door and see what there is beyond that door, while another is kind of keeping firmly a hand on the doorknob to stop it moving. And there's also that fear of being too much, of being afraid of embracing your spirituality or your mediumship. It can also create a fear of being too visible, too powerful, or simply just in general too much for other people. Oh, too intuitive, too independent, too ambitious, too intense, too capable, too free. So the person learns to turn down the volume on their own presence. They will minimize their knowledge, shrink their ambitions, and apologize before they speak, or allow others to take up all the space even when they have something important to share. So they're not only hiding their gifts, they may be hiding an entire part of their identity. Of course, even today, people who step outside the norm can be criticized or rejected. I've been there. There are trolls on social media. The wound doesn't invent every negative reaction from others, but it can amplify the fear of those reactions, as if every comment could turn into a condemnation all over again. Now, not everyone experiences the exact same signs of a witch wound. Some people regularly receive accurate, intuitive messages that we call intuitive hits. But the moment they think about sharing them, they tell themselves, it was probably just a coincidence. I'm sure I just imagined this. People are going to think I'm weird. I'm just going to keep that to myself. So they don't necessarily lack intuitive abilities. They may be unconsciously trying to avoid the visibility that comes with them. Another common manifestation is remaining a student forever. We don't talk a lot about that one, but it's one that is very real in the spiritual community. So imagine a person wants to become psychic, develop their intuitive gifts, and they take courses. They read a dozen of books, they receive plenty of validation when they do reading with others, but they never feel ready enough to practice with others or share what they know. So they always need one more course or one more certification, stamp of approval. Learning still feels safe because they can develop their gifts in the shadows, but taking action means becoming visible, and that's often when the fear wakes up. Someone may also talk openly about spirituality with people who share their beliefs, then completely shut down around their family and coworkers. That is one manifestation. But here I want to say something very important. I do not want you to go and open your windows and scream, I am psychic and I believe in past lives, because if you do that, I don't think all your neighbors think alike. that they think like you, I mean. And you may very well be bashed, there can be serious conflict. And I think it's okay to decide who you talk about this to. So you don't think like, oh, I need to heal my witch wound and I absolutely need to tell everyone what I'm doing. I don't agree with this. But look at, am I hiding a part of myself unnecessarily to others? Like a lot of people I talk with that aren't like my friends or family. Like my family members know what I do, but when I meet people, new friends or neighbors or I don't know, people at the grocery store and they ask what I do, I usually say I work as a translator and proofreader, which is the truth. I still do that part-time. And when sometimes I will say, oh yeah, when I do social media post or no, sometimes I say I have another business because people are telling me, oh, with AI, you must probably don't have a lot of work in translation and proofreading, which is in translation, it is true. There is way, way less work than it used to be. And I say, oh yeah, well, I started developing another business that is growing. And I just say I work in the spiritual field. And funny enough, the people who aren't very spiritual, they won't ask any questions. And people who are into spirituality are like, oh, I'm all into spirituality. Tell me more about what you're doing. I'm interested. And then you kind of see who you can share that with. So there are different levels of sharing, and you can just say that you're exploring spirituality for your inner development, or you're reading self-help book, or you're into self-help or whatever. So it's not about shouting everything that you are doing in order to heal the witch wound. It just makes sure that you don't hide who you are to the world. So look at, are you hiding your tarot cards or changing your vocabulary when it's not really necessary, because maybe a part of you is scared to be the weird one. And next thing I want to share about is the sister wound. So we talk about the witch wound a lot, but one that we rarely talk about is the sister wound. Now, this is a wound that happened when people accused during witch hunts were women, and sometimes they were accused by other women. Women who wanted to protect themselves. And other women may have participated in the accusations to protect their reputation, family, safety. And that is called the sister wound. This isn't about saying that women are naturally rivals. It's about understanding that collective fear can drive people to do things. And in this lifetime, that memory can contribute to a particular difficulty trusting other women. So someone may be afraid of being envied or betrayed. They may hesitate to share their plans, or feel as though there isn't enough space for everyone or for every woman in the group, and feel like, oh, I'm going to be kind of cast out of the group. And the wound can also manifest in the opposite direction. Someone may hesitate to support a visible or powerful woman because they're afraid of being associated with her and becoming the target as well. So the wound doesn't only influence our fear or taking space, it can also affect the way we react when someone else dares to speak up and take her space. And I find it particularly meaningful that we can now transform this old wound of rivalry into something more supportive and empowering. And I did so recently. Now, this is a collective calendar agenda that I participated in. It's only in French because, as you know, my editor is French. My editor is Secret d'Étoile. But if you happen to understand French, this is called the Coven of the 13 Witches, and it's the 2027 agenda. And it's an agenda where we are 13 witches, 13 authors from Secret d'Étoile. We have been selected, and they have taken some of our rituals and put it in the agenda so that there is a ritual that fits with every month, and the moon rituals as well. So you have, just put it over there, you have a few of my rituals in there, but we are 13 women who contributed to that agenda, and all these little things, it's part of healing the witch wound and the sister wound. And that takes me to talking to you about my own witch wound. So for a long time, I didn't understand why I was so afraid of being judged, rejected, or betrayed, or why I found it so difficult to publicly embrace my intuitive abilities. When I looked at my childhood and my experiences in this lifetime, I couldn't find anything that fully explained the intensity of those fears. Now, granted, I did grow up in a setting where my parents' family, they weren't particularly spiritual, and they thought that psychics were all charlatans and scammers. So there was that, but the fears were very intense, so it couldn't only be explained by that. And so during a regression, well before I became a psychic, it was actually while I was studying on developing my psychic abilities. I did a past life regression, and I found out that, well, first of all, I asked my spirit guides, is there a past life that may be related to a witch wound? And then I saw someone from my village that had falsely accused me. And I had been brought before some kind of tribunal but the outcome had already been decided. It was kind of all a play they were putting up, but I was already tried. And what hurt me the most, however, wasn't only the public accusation, but it was that out of fear, my husband had chosen to side with the villagers, and instead of defending me, he confirmed that I had always done things that were considered strange. And I was then cast out of my community and separated from my loved ones, never able to see my children again. And the persecution came from the group, but the betrayal came from someone I loved and trusted. And that experience had left several conclusions imprinted on my soul. Being the people I love can betray me. Being different can cost me my family. The group won't protect me, and showing people who I really am is dangerous. And discovering this lifetime didn't make my fear of judgment and rejection disappear within minutes, but it helped me understand that the intensity of my reaction didn't come only from what was happening around me today. A part of me was still behaving as though embracing my intuitive abilities could cost me my safety, my relationships, and my sense of belonging. And for as long as I can remember, I've always had that enormous belief that a mother should never be separated from her child. That was so strong, and it became stronger when I became a mom. And after seeing that past life, I understood why, because in that past life, I was never able to see my children again, and they were about like 5-7 years old, like so young, and I couldn't see them afterwards, and it hurt a lot. And in this life, part of the way that I am healing this is that from time to time, I give donations to a charity that helps single women in need, single mothers in need, that is, so that they can have a decent apartment and continue with their academic studies, and so that they have a safe environment, good foundations, so that they can keep their children with them. And so this is how I have discovered my witch wound and dealt with it. And in this episode, I mainly wanted to help you recognize and understand this wound, and I didn't go in detail about how to really explore, do the past life regression and heal, because it requires much more context and support. And that's what I teach in my past life regression course, which I will release this fall. And as I said, I'm devoting 2 complete sessions, lessons, that is, to the witch wound, to understand how it manifests, where it comes from, and how to heal it. And still on the subject of past lives, in 2 weeks, we're going to broaden the conversation, and I will introduce to you the 5 main categories of past life trauma and explain how each one may still be showing up in your current life. As always, thank you so much for being here with me. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Mystical and Practical podcast with Meli Guidance. If this episode spoke to you, please subscribe to the channel and leave some stars, a thumbs up, or a comment. It truly helps to share the podcast with other old souls seeking a deeper understanding of the spirit world. If you're interested in getting an Akashic Records reading, a tarot reading, or joining one of my online courses, you will find all the details at meliguidance.com. This podcast was edited by plcm.ca and the original music was composed by record.bandcamp.com. Until next time, remember, we are all souls having a human experience, and we can all be mystical and practical.